Hey friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation I had with Joe Saward, one of Formula One's most independent and insightful journalists. During winter break, I had the opportunity to speak with Joe, who is one of only 5 journalists who attended every Formula One race last year, and he does it entirely on his own dime. As you'll hear, we dive into some fascinating territory that cuts through the drama and gets to the real business of Formula One. Joe walks us through the private Barcelona testing controversy, explaining the political and business calculations behind closing those sessions to media and fans, and what it reveals about the competing interests between teams, race promoters, and Formula One itself. We also discuss what to expect from the 2026 regulation changes, the brutal reality of F1's travel schedule, and how it's reshaping the sport's workforce, and why Formula One's passion-driven culture makes it fundamentally different from any other business. But before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Okay, I am excited, Joe, to have you back on our podcast. Thank you for joining.
It's a pleasure.
And I know this is the winter break. Last time we had our first conversation, it was also during the winter break, because catching you as one of the few journalists that goes to every single race, and I will point out, you do that on your own dime, which is kind of amazing to me. It is also, I want to always respect your time. And I'm so grateful that you and I have been able to have a bit of an offline conversation. Now we're going to put a little bit on the record, because I was so profoundly impacted by some of the insights that we wanted to make sure that we were able to share that with our audience. So thanks for being willing to give me a little bit more of your time.
I'm very happy to. I'm trying in a sort of weird way to educate the new audience and to bring them. I'm trying to make money, let's be honest, to get people to come and buy my newsletter, to find out what really goes on in Formula One, not what you read on social media, whatever. There's an awful lot of rubbish out there. And I just happen to be, more by luck than judgment maybe, somebody who's been on the inside for a very long time, who knows what's going on, and talks to people who are actually involved, unlike almost all the journalists don't ever do, except in controlled situations. I do, and which means I can get stuff nobody else can get. So that's why I like to do it. And also, there's a massive opportunity with F1 in America, and particularly also in Asia too, because Formula One is growing there as well. And it's also fun. I like telling people what's going on in Formula One. It's my passion, and my passion is to spread the word about what a fantastic, amazing sport it is. Because it's not just a sport. It's people, Drive to Survive has kind of shown a little bit of that. But I don't think people realize just what a business it is, too. It's a massive business, and it's a fantastic sport. And it is just, there's nothing like it in the world at all. And so, it's my passion, and I want to share that.
I think that comes through in both the way that you have your conversations, the way that you write your newsletter. I'm really grateful that I'm a subscriber, and the insights that you share. It is very clear that you have not only depth of knowledge, but access, which has enabled you to have so many opportunities to lay seeds that over time, as a reader, I'm able to see how they flourish, like how you're able to provide us with, I won't say forecasting is probably the best word, of these are things that are coming in through the business itself, which resonates with me. One of the many, as we said offline, like one of the many reasons why I enjoy the sport is the business side of it. And some of it is also the politics of it. Not so much the drama.
Yeah, the drama of the backstabbing in the background is always, that's what Drive to Survive is all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, the nice thing about being able to talk to everybody is that you can see things coming. And if you read the newsletter, you'll see, I think I wrote about Christian Horner and Alpine back in November. And it's going to happen eventually. It's just a matter of taking a bit of time to get through there. He might get outbid by other people. There are other people out there. But at the moment, I think he's got access to enormous amounts of money. because everyone wants to invest in Formula One, and he's just trying to work his way through all the various things. Alpine is perfect for him. It's just down the road from where he lives. It's a decent team that needs fixing. He knows all the right people to hire. And so it kind of makes sense for everybody for it to happen. So we'll see if it happens or not, but I have a vague suspicion it will, just because it makes sense. And that's the kind of thing that I'm always looking into what's going to happen next, as opposed to reacting to daily news. I did the daily news thing for years and years and years. And it just wears you down in the end, because it's just every day you're chasing stories, and every day, if you're not making any money doing it, which in those days you never did, because websites didn't really make money when I was doing that. I did like 10 years of that, and I wasn't even salaried. It was just, that was a sort of a, let's see if I can make some money doing this. But there we are, we learn along the way and we make our mistake. Nowadays, I generally only work for subscription, and you have to, because, flying around the world costs an absolute fortune, particularly with Formula One being popular now. Hotel bills. I mean, if I go in my time off and stay in a hotel, I'm always amazed and happy about how cheap it feels, because I pay so much for hotels around the world that, to pay something which many people would say, well, that's far too much money. And you go, nah, it's not. It's a real bargain. But I'm sort of warped in that respect. And also, it's the same thing with airfares, to be honest. If you've got to go somewhere on a specific weekend, you've got to pay whatever it costs to get there. And so, you end up sometimes doing some funny things like flying to Manila or Ho Chi Minh City or wherever, you have to go through to get there, this kind of stuff. But it's all part of the fun as well. And I think that's another thing that fans really like. Formula One is like a magic carpet where you can, if you're sitting in the office and you're bored in the afternoons, you can get on your magic carpet and go, wouldn't it be great if I was going too? And, I could fill in the name of the place and I'll tell you if it's nice or not. But it's a dream thing. And I remember that when I was a fan a long time ago now, but it was like sort of, wow, these people, they go to a lot of places. That looks real fun. And they go watch motor racing. I mean, how good does it get? And so that's kind of what my modus operandi is. My newsletter is a very business thing, but I have a thing called the Green Notebook as well, which is something for just the people to understand what it's like to go places, with a bit of news thrown in there to sort of nudge them in the direction of the newsletter.
And I love both of those. I consume them when they come out and have found them very informative, which leads me to a question that we were having before we turned on the recording. I don't know where this episode is actually going to land when we air it, but I think it'll be evergreen because it's about a business decision that has been made within the sport, which will be something the sport will have to decide in the future if it's going to repeat, which is specifically, we have this private testing week that's happening in Barcelona. And I was asking you about, because I was watching some content creators that were highlighting that it was private and nobody was able to see, the media was not being allowed. And you were explaining to me a little bit about how this came to be and the implications that it draws both for currently, especially as we're going into a new reg cycle, as well as is this something that could be a precedent. So I wondered if you would be able to share a little bit more about that.
People say, why is this happening? There's no logic to it. The logic is very simple. We have a new set of rules, engine rules, and some of the engine manufacturers who were less confident than others, if you like, wanted to have additional testing to make sure their cars work. And so basically it was agreed, well, we need to have extra testing this year. And then they said, well, it wants to be, quite early. And it wants to be in Europe, so because all the teams are based in Europe. So don't believe anyone who tells you they've got bases anywhere else, because they haven't. They all had to be able to get there easily at a time earlier than the official tests. Now, Barcelona is a good place to do that. The problem is that Formula One agreed to that, but only reluctantly, because they have a deal with Bahrain to have the first official test of the year, and Bahrain pays for that right to do it. So a test in Barcelona would take away the value that Bahrain is investing in having their first official test. And so it was agreed that the Barcelona test would be private. In other words, behind closed doors, no one would be let in. I'm amazed that there have been journalists and photographers. Photographers are in there, some of them because they're working for teams, but I think there's a very explicit rule that they can only take certain kinds of pictures, fairly close up around the team itself. But in terms of independent photographers going to take pictures in general, I don't think there's anybody there. There might be one or two F1 related or FIA related people who are taking photographs, whatever, but certainly not any big number. I'm amazed that journalists are just going down there and standing outside with binoculars. I mean, they're making a point, and I guess that's why they're there. They're making the point that this is crazy, and it is crazy. But at the same time, there is a reason for it. And how do we do it otherwise? It probably won't happen again because we're not having new regulations now, in theory at least, unless Mohammed bin Sulayem wants to try and change the rules again, until 2031. So, and we've already seen him try to change the rules a bit, and he's been told to go away, and no, we're not doing that. So, that's pretty, the teams have a lot of power. So I think the same circumstances won't arise again until 2031. And we'll just go back to the normal pre-season test in mid-February. The other thing is also that the short winter break, it takes a big toll on the teams because they don't get any time off. And the people who came home from Abu Dhabi, and some of them stayed for a week afterwards running the other sort of end-of-season testing. They got back home just in time for Christmas. And there's a very short winter break where the factories have to close down. But literally, by 10 days ago, mid-January, everybody was back working, getting the cars ready. And that's not healthy. You lose staff, people who don't get enough holiday. The turnover of staff in Formula One these days is way higher than it used to be. And the number of people who are there for life. When I see somebody, I'm wandering around the paddock and somebody I know from years ago comes by. And it's great to see him. And they go, I don't know anybody here anymore. And I said, yeah, that's what happens here. The turnover is so high now that what we call the Formula One lifers are much fewer in number because the travel is just brutal. So, some of them will do it for a few years, then go back and have factory-based jobs and that sort of thing. And there are some, the ambitious ones who love it all and don't have a lot in their lives otherwise, for whatever reason, will stay out and do the whole thing. But the drivers do it and the leading engineers do it. They're all getting paid a great deal of money to actually spend their lives on the road. It's pretty much everybody's getting paid a lot of money to have their life on the road, apart from people, the observers, the journos and people like that, which is why there's so few numbers. I was saying earlier on, only 5 journalists went to all the races last year. And one of them was funded by the FIA. Because he was doing interview stuff. So basically 4 journalists, and that includes all the ones on salaries. I mean, publications may have more people. I mean, the publication may be at every race, but they have, they've got to have rotating members of staff. So actually, journalists who did all the races last year, that's it, 5, which is shocking for me.
What do you think that means for the culture moving forward? If you have people churning through the sustainable aspect of knowledge, institutionalism, even just the drive to continue pushing. When you think you're only going to be there for 2 years, you're just kind of putting it in and then you're heading out. You've got this as your credential that you can then go back to. How do you think it's going to change and affect the sport?
I think that a lot of people at sort of mechanic, junior engineer level come in because it sounds exciting and glamorous and it's what they've always wanted to do. And then a lot of them learn in the first couple of years. In fact, to be fair, a lot of them don't travel for the first couple of years. They're working in the factories and they still have that ambition to travel. And then they do it and they find out how tough it is to do it. And then you'll see quite often they'll last 2-3 years. And then people who are really, really motivated to be certain roles, like team principals and top engineers, they will stay longer because they're driven by that ambition, and being at the races is important. Not just for the experience, it's knowing people, knowing everybody, knowing how it works, not just hearing about it from other people. And so there is still a few people you see, but I can see why the number of lifers is much smaller. And also I think there's a level where the modern generation is a bit different. Their ideas about life-work balance are very different to how things were when I was younger, certainly. People put more into their jobs, or more people did. I'm not saying everybody did. I think there was a lot more people willing to sacrifice a lot of other things to get where they wanted to go. How that will impact in the long term, just to finish off on that point, is that I don't think it will make much difference. Certain jobs are very, very hard to find people to fill them in Formula One. There's a number of roles where teams really struggle to find people because they don't have experience in every aspect. So, people like technical directors these days, for example, all engineers tend to be quite specific in certain areas. So you'll have hydraulics engineers, you'll have electronics engineers, you'll have strategists and all the rest of this, but very few of them nowadays have the overall view of having done all the different jobs along the way. Way back in the 70s, they used to literally, 9 guys would build the car, including designing it. And nowadays you're 1,000 people. So there's an awful lot of highly specialized people, but they don't have the broad overview, which is what you need to have to be a technical director, for example. Team principals are a breed apart. They have to have all kinds of different skills. I mean, Adrian Newey is supposed to be the team principal of Aston Martin. There's no way that he can be a team principal, not in the traditional sense of the word, because he hasn't got time. He's too busy building race cars. He can't do all the rest as well. That's why you have chief technical officers and technical director, chassis, technical director, engine, all these sort of divisions. Again, it's just giving people titles so that they sound better. It's an American thing, actually. Americans like titles. Everybody's got to be chief this and chief that. Well, that never used to happen in Formula One, but nowadays everybody's got chief this, chief that. It's quite funny, actually.
Do you feel that it's becoming more of a corporatization of the sport by taking that approach?
Not really, because there's a thing that drives Formula One which other industries don't necessarily have, which is passion. This is an industry that is driven entirely by passion. And if you don't have the passion, it's not just another job. You can pass through and have a couple of years and you go off and do something else. Then you're not passionate and you weren't meant to be around it. But the people who are passionate and are meant to be there, it's just not like any other job. There was a book years ago written by a Formula One journalist, and the title of the book was "It Beats Working." And that's exactly what it is nowadays. It beats working. It doesn't feel like a job. When you get up in the morning, you don't ever, ever, ever say, "Oh, gosh, another day at the office." You never say that. It's another day of, wow, what's going to happen today? That's the drive and the passion that you get from the sport, the buzz of being part of the game. And that, I think, is, some people catch that buzz. And a lot of people maybe have it for a while and then go, this is too much. And how will it work in the long term? I don't know. But there'll always be passionate people who are driven. I mean, there may not be tens of thousands of them, which is what we kind of need at the moment. But there's a limit to how big teams can grow. Although it's amazing what some of the teams are doing now. I don't know if you know, but Mercedes-Benz, for example, the racing team alone turned over $1 billion last year. $1 billion for a racing team. And the profit margins are massive because they have a budget cap that stops them spending. So that's why all these investors are rushing to come in, because this is a money-making opportunity. And sport is a very cool thing to be associated with. People like it. People follow it, people buy stuff. And that's why the sport is so healthy. It's because the money's being not just thrown into a big hole like it used to be before the budget cap. And the share of the prize money is much better, which is why people are fighting over entries and why silly amounts of money are being offered for racing teams.
So let me pivot to a different question. We're in the new regulation cycle. Can you give me some of your thoughts about what you expect this to look like? Are there challenges that you're foreseeing from your seat, or do you see this as a great new opportunity for the sport?
It's always a new opportunity. When people ask me, what was your favorite season in Formula One, I always say the same thing, which is next year, because the sport improves every year. It gets better. Okay, now the racing may be, you have to understand that you can't always have, unless you're playing circuses, you can't always have wheel-to-wheel competition, with it being decided on the last lap. You can do that with NASCAR if you want to throw the yellows at the right time and play the games that they play. But it's, it's a different thing. It's not pure racing in the same way. The last couple of years have been astonishing in Formula One, how close everything is. And that's because the regulations were mature and technical development had kind of reached a ceiling. So everybody was pushing up towards the same ceiling. And therefore everyone was insanely close. Now that won't be the case this next year. There'll be people who are ahead. If you have one engine that's better than the others, which we may well have this year, you've still got 3 or 4 teams who are using that engine. So you're still going to have a championship being fought by somebody. So The word on the street is that the Mercedes engine will be ahead, and there you've got Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, and Alpine, who will all be fighting at the front if that's the case. We've also got Red Bull and Racing Bulls who are using the Red Bull powertrain's Ford engine, which seems to be quite useful as well. Ferrari, we have 3 teams using Ferrari, including, weirdly, Cadillac. Everyone talking about Cadillac coming in, but Cadillac is using chassis built by somebody else and engines built by Ferrari. So at the moment, it's not really Cadillac, but there we are. We have Haas. We have Ferrari themselves. We have Audi, one team, which is the old Sauber team. And we have, again, a bit of a weird one. We have Aston Martin using Hondas. So you've got your 11 teams now. I think they'll be a bit more spread out than in previous years. I think there'll be great racing going on. I think there'll be exciting qualifying sessions and exciting races. Whether or not they can overtake any more, we'll just have to wait and see, any more than they normally can. It's very hard to balance technology and show business. You have to find the right balance, and it's not easy. The best advice I can ever give to any fan is to go to one of these races and watch it, because nobody who goes to a race comes away going, wow, well, that was not very interesting, was it? They all go, wow, want to do this again, which is why it's become popular. The thing is, you've got to get people through the door to see it so that they can become super fans. And that's what Formula One is doing very successfully at the moment. It's bringing in whole new demographics of fans, and you can see that from the sponsors going on. You can see that from having, in Vegas, we had a Hello Kitty grandstand, and I'm sort of looking at this as a sort of elderly gentleman, let's put it out there, going, what in the world is going on here, But why not? I'm all for it. So if we have Mickey Mouse, yeah, okay, Mickey Mouse and Formula One is a strange combination, but why not? That's my view on it. Okay, let's do it. Let's have Barbie. Let's have Charles Leclerc meets Barbie, or whatever, Or actually, I think girls prefer Carlos Sainz, don't they? I don't know.
So let me ask you this, going back to the regs. You talked about the engine. What are your thoughts about the battery? Because there's a major change in the way the battery is going to be used in what we've ever seen. How do you think that that's going to affect the racing itself?
I think that it will very quickly be, any glitches they have will be sorted out quickly. As I said, the big teams have got 1,000 people, 1,000 very clever people working away. It doesn't take Formula One long to master anything. These people are also people who are problem solvers. They come to motor racing because they get instant results. They leave aviation on aeronautics because they can't be bothered to wait for 5 years to see what their piece of stuff they worked on looks like on a fighter plane. They just want instant gratification, if you like. And F1 gives you that. Every weekend you've got to do better. And so if it all goes wrong one week, you've got to fix the car and go and do better next week. And for an engineering exercise, that's brilliant. And it also means that things get done really quickly. So the batteries, I don't think there'll be any major problems. There's slight worries about the electronic control units, because the company that the FIA chose to do that has been having some difficulties. And there were some serious glitches going on, but the teams have weighed in to try and help out and solve the problem so it doesn't become an issue in the early part of the year. But we might see a few cars dropping out with electrical problems, which isn't caused by the engine or the batteries themselves, but by the ECUs, which are mandated. You have to use it. But there may be a few of those. We've seen that happen in Formula 2 in the past, where you'll see sometimes in the early part of a new engine formula in F2, I remember seeing like 4 cars left on the grid at the start because not everything was working properly. There's an element where you have to accept that, because it's really luck as to which ones go wrong and which ones don't go wrong. And that can affect everybody. So you might have people losing out on points early in the season with one of these glitches, but they'll gain them later when somebody else has the same problem. It's kind of self-balancing. But you can have situations where you might lose 2 or 3 scores if you're an unlucky team. One of the things about modern Formula One is also, if you look at the percentage finishing rates at races, they're astonishing. They're absolutely astonishing. That's because these cars are so bulletproof when they first hit the track. I think Mercedes the other day did 100 laps on the first day with a new car, new engine, new everything. That always amazes me, because back in the day, people would do 2 or 3 laps and some bit would fall off. But everything is so advanced and so clever and so well developed that they can just arrive, boom, and do 100 laps. That's impressive stuff. I mean, everything about Formula One is impressive if you dig into it deep enough. And I think that's, as casual fans, you want to dig more deeply all the time just to find out all the good stuff that is there. And it's not just about electronics and engineering, and it's about marketing, it's about business, it's about sponsorship, it's about money, it's about relationships between people. It's just fabulous stuff. But there are so many brilliant people in the sport, and that's, for me, one of the great things. You just never know who you're going to meet next. And their backgrounds are astonishing. I've been doing an article for years and years in various publications over time, which nowadays is called character reference, which is basically just tells the story of how somebody got to Formula One. But the stories that I've found over the years are just amazing about how people are driven from being circus performers. I've known people with 2 or 3 academic degrees coming to Formula One and working in hospitality and stuff like that. It's amazing. And some incredible chefs, for example. There's just brilliant people everywhere. And that's one of the joys of being involved as well. You just are surrounded by interesting and brilliant people.
So I really appreciate that. For me, as I've been looking at where the regs are changing, and we've already released it, Dick had extrapolated and tried to do a layperson friendly analysis of the regulations. I kept coming back to the reliability, and reliability, as you said, just is something we're so consistently seeing, that for these new fans especially, if we start to have the reliability issues that of yesteryear start to now, what will that do for the business? What will that do for the sport? Especially as more people are coming to races and they're expecting to see the team and the driver that they really are rooting for. And if that car isn't racing, how does that, 1 or 2, that's something. If you can kind of get over that. But if this is a sea change in our regulations and it's going to start impacting the overall year in multiple years, that's where I just wonder. But it's good to hear you say that, Mercedes came and they were able to do 100 laps. And a few decades ago, that wouldn't have been the case. Reliability would have been much more questionable. That allays a little bit of my fears. And I do have confidence in the innovative prowess of the teams and their dedication, because they have dollars on the line. Ultimately, nobody wants that problem to linger more than a race or 2. They're going to need to get that quickly resolved. So I hear you, and that gives me confidence, because like you, I'm passionate about the sport and want the sport to thrive. And I don't even go to all the races. I watch them on my TV. But I really appreciate your insight on this. I want to be mindful of your time. So I'm going to say, let's hopefully have more conversations in the future, Joe. I know you're busy, but we would love to have you back on. I know this was a much more impromptu conversation, but I'm grateful that you gave me a little bit of time.
I'm very happy to do more and give time when I have it. And I think if you stop and think about it as a fan, you have 24 races in a year all over the world. You have to add to that. So you have 4 or 5 days when you have 4 days basically when you're there at the circuits. You then have, quite often, you have a full day of travel before and after. And when you start adding it up in the course of the year, you suddenly realize just how little time you get to go home. And that's really an important element that I think a lot of fans don't understand. It's really hard to do the whole Formula One calendar. It's not in any way, shape or form easy. You have to really be dedicated and want it. What we do, we go around the world and we're like a circus. That's why sometimes you hear people saying the Formula One circus. We go around the world, we pitch our tent, and then sometimes, like for example in Las Vegas, we pitch our tent in Las Vegas. 8 days later, because Vegas is on a Saturday, but 8 days later, that tent is pitched in Qatar and everything works and everything is where it's supposed to be. Even the Formula One logistics is utterly amazing. How they get stuff around, how they go through all the customs, how they do any of that stuff. Everything about it is astonishing. But, we do that 24 times a year. We just zip in and out of countries. And sometimes it's really complicated. But there we are. That's another thing. Formula One, as I said earlier on, is full of problem solvers. It's the only sport that went through COVID, we were back in action long before everybody else, and traveling the world, which was even more astonishing because, even domestic championships were working. But Formula One was right back on it because they couldn't afford not to be. There's a business, and that helped grow the audience because there was the only sport that was on telly at the time. So I'm very proud of being part of Formula One in lots of different ways because it's just such a great sport. And that's why I just want more fans to come and join in.
I love it. And that's where we are like-minded with you. And I really appreciate your time, Joe. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, friends, what did you think of this conversation? We'd love to hear from you. What questions are you wrestling with? What should we dive into next? Send them to Sabrina at 2guysaGirlandF1.com. We read every single one, and frankly, your questions are usually more interesting than what we'd come up with on our own. And with that, let me say, this ends our conversation. But we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in because we're just 2 guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.